Newsnight now on BBC Two with Gavin Esler.
The first by-election caused by the MP's expenses scandal. How much trouble is ahead for Gordon Brown? Tonight, polls closed half an hour ago in Norwich after what could be another nightmarish by-election for the government.
David Cameron made a surprise polling day visit to Norwich early this morning and looks like getting a handsome victory here. The remaining question is whether Labour has done enough even to come second.
The swine flu website opened today and, you've guessed it, immediately crashed. How confident should we be about the Department of Health's handling of the emergency? And how far does it encourage people to abuse the system? The Canadian woman who legally married a Welshman and was told to get out of Britain, something a Home Office official described as an inconvenience.
He's ripping my marriage apart. He's taking the only thing I have and throwing it away.
And the blunt memoirs. Newsnight has special access to the papers of one of the most damaging Soviet spies of the 20th century. Good evening. The story of by-elections for Gordon Brown's government isn't a good one. Labour activists are bracing themselves for another defeat in Norwich North, though the actual counting of votes will not begin till tomorrow morning. The sitting Labour MP Ian Gibson decided to quit after being embroiled in the MP's expenses row, though many local people seem to see him as more sinned against than sinning. Newsnight's political editor Michael Crick is in Norwich tonight. Michael.
Well, the Conservatives need a swing of less than 6% to win this seat. So in the current political climate, it would be astonishing, really, if they weren't to win tomorrow. And certainly all the parties tonight seem to think the Conservatives are heading for victory. The consensus seems to be that Labour will probably come second. And that's certainly the impression I got today as I spent several hours touring around the polling stations. A big factor in this by-election could simply be different levels of turnout. And late this morning, voting certainly looked brisk in Taverham, one of the Tories' strongest wards, a village beyond the city boundaries. Well, I'd put you down as Labour.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
I didn't think you were such a bad judge of character.
So you both voted Conservative then?
Yes. Yes.
She's a nice little girl, isn't she? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I read all through the literature, and she was the only one that did anything about us in Taverham.
But the expenses issue looked like being a factor for all the big parties. Can you tell us who you voted for?
I voted Green.
Green?
For the Greens.
Do you normally vote Green?
No.
Who do you normally vote for?
Conservative.
And what's made you switch?
Well, I've been very disappointed in the MP's scandalous behaviour.
The expenses thing, right.
Exactly.
Labour's been hit too this week, not so much by election fever as swine flu, which confined their man, Chris Ostrovsky, to bed. You didn't think of voting for him out of sympathy?
I didn't open the door to any of his agents, just in case it got over my doorstep.
In Labour's best wards, traditionally, some were staying loyal today. But the party will undoubtedly suffer from many people simply staying at home. What do you think of Ian Gibson, the former MP?
I'm not Labour, but I thought he was a very good man.
Yeah,
As I told him 4 years ago when he came round on the last election, he asked me who I was going to vote for. I said, well, I can't vote for you. He said, why not? I said, because I don't trust your governors. He said, and neither do I. And that's the gospel truth.
These two had gone for some hefty exercise and exercised their right to vote.
I have indeed, yes.
Do you normally vote BNP?
I just have lately, mate, because I'm just, you know, I've been a man that's out of work now just through all the immigrants and all the people coming over here taking our jobs, and I'm a skilled tradesman, never lost my job through Polish and people like this, so with BNP at least I won't be no more of that.
The irony of this campaign is that while the previous Labour MP Ian Gibson was ditched by his party's high command over his expenses, the main parties here have all tried to claim his mantle. Indeed, Labour's last-minute leaflet today had the cheek to claim their new man would be independent-minded, just like Gibson. And this evening, at Norwich North's biggest polling station, it was clear that if Gibson had fought this contest as an independent, he might have won.
Considering how things panned out with the rest of the MPs, I think he was rather knifed in the back, so to speak.
Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I think that's a good many people around Norwich would think the same as well.
So if he'd stood, he might have won?
I would say
Yes,
there was
I think he would have.
a more than fair chance that he would, yeah.
Though not everyone was a fan.
I suppose when you look at it, who would have trusted him again? You know, this is the thing. I mean, once they've done something a little bit dodgy, they're better out of it, aren't they? Because no one's got to vote for them.
Tonight, the former Labour leader on Norfolk Council was forecasting defeat.
I think, unfortunately, from a Labour point of view, it'll probably go Tory, and I think maybe we've only got ourselves to blame for that.
Why do you say that?
I think there's a lot of feeling within the constituency that the former MP Ian Gibson was treated very badly by the Labour Party, and I certainly got that, even though I live in the neighbouring constituency. When I stood in the county council elections, people were saying that they weren't going to come out and vote because of the way Ian had been treated.
David Cameron paid his 6th visit here today. Expect his 7th tomorrow, cheering victory. The Greens could well be celebrating too, with their best ever vote in a by-election. Yeah, the Greens' best previous vote in a by-election, I understand, was 7.2% last summer in Holton, Price and Howden, the David Davis election. I'd certainly expect them to do better than that tomorrow. I doubt, though, whether they'll get up to the 22% of the vote that they got at Brighton Pavilion in the last general election. But the interesting thing about this campaign is that the smaller parties have been picking up votes all over the place. UKIP, BNP, Craig Murray, the former ambassador to Uzbekistan. And I think this is partly a reflection, of course, of the whole expenses thing and a follow-on from the European elections where minor parties and candidates did well.
So, Michael, how does all this actually look for Labour then tonight?
Well, the thing for Labour is that it has got several excuses in store that it hasn't had in the 2 by-elections it had last summer in Crewe and in Glasgow East. It's got the Gibson factor, it's got the fact that the whole of the expenses row that has affected all the political parties. I think you'll probably hear some mutterings about the calibre of the candidate, that he was perhaps a bit inexperienced, he wasn't local. Some people are saying the fact that he's had swine flu for the last couple of days has affected Labour's campaign. And indeed, Gordon Brown yesterday was talking about the unique circumstances of this by-election. On the other hand, Labour will also perhaps be able to point to the Conservative vote. Now, it's interesting tonight, some Liberal Democrats are saying they don't think that the Conservatives will get more than about 40% of the vote. Now, if that is the case, that could be rather disappointing for the Conservatives in the light of the fact that they've thrown everything at this campaign. Huge resources, lots of money, all their people. There have been some days where they've had 40 Conservative MPs up here, most of the shadow cabinet, Theresa May here all the time. I don't remember a by-election where the leader of the opposition was actually campaigning on polling day, as David Cameron was this morning out leafleting along with George Osborne. So Labour will be looking closely at the Conservative vote. Except they're not going to win, they'll be looking closely at that vote and saying, well, actually, the Conservatives really, in the current circumstances, should have done better. But we don't know at the moment. The Conservatives may well go streak well ahead of Labour, and who knows, we'll just have to wait for the vote tomorrow lunchtime.
OK, but just very briefly, does it look like, is your sense from talking to people there that Labour mishandled Ian Gibson?
Terribly badly. This was a real own goal for the Labour Party. They set up this star chamber which basically told Ian Gibson he had to step down as a candidate at the next election, which caused him to resign. Now, there's an almost unanimity in politics that Gibson was treated unfairly and unjustly, that although he didn't act perhaps perfectly, that there were many, many other MPs in all parties, members of the cabinet and the shadow cabinet, whose behaviour was just as bad as his. And that is reflected at the grassroots, where Gibson has been a hugely popular figure. If Labour does lose tomorrow, it will have lost this seat largely through its own actions in ditching him as a candidate.
Thanks very much, Michael. Well, I'm joined from Birmingham now by the Labour MP Tony Wright, who's chairman of the Public Administration Committee. Mr. Wright, can I pick up just on that point? Do you think Ian Gibson has been badly treated, frankly, and had he run again in the general election, who knows, he might have won?
Well, Ian Gibson is a friend and, till recently, a former colleague of mine. Yes, I do think he was badly treated. I think there are people in the House who commented far worse things than he did. I think he was a victim of a moment when all the parties and all the party leaders were falling over each other to show how tough they were being. And I think one of the fascinating paradoxes of this election is that if Ian had been standing, a victim of the expenses scandal, this first election since we had the expenses row, he'd have walked it by a mile.
But again, the question will come up about Gordon Brown's own judgment, his leadership, and the fact that come this time tomorrow, he may well again look like a loser.
Well, I would just urge you not just to feed the media narrative about every story coming back to Gordon Brown, because if you do that, I mean, I shall have to say the things that I will say, which is, who got it right on the world financial crisis, who led the world to fiscal stimulus and economic recovery.
Well, then the voters of Norwich North will be applauding him today, no doubt. But it's quite possible that people don't think that, and they think that actually he's not much of a great leader, and he's made a mistake over Ian Gibson as well.
No, I think this is another election where people want to kick the politicians, and they'll kick particularly the politicians who are in power. This is different from when you come to a general election, which we'll have in about 10 months' time, where people have to choose a government. And then it's those, it's really the fog clears, and it's those big decisions about who took the right decisions at the right time and who's going to protect people best in the tough times ahead. That becomes the real question then.
But if you can't win or hold on to a 5,000 plus majority, it's going to be very difficult for you to win come the next election in May.
Well, everybody is saying, and I noticed that Michael Crick has just been saying it too, that this is quite different from the feel of the Crewe by-election last year, when there was this real anti-government, indeed anti-Gordon Brown feeling. I don't think anybody senses that here. There's a turning away from politics generally. The opposition will be the beneficiaries of that. But I think unless they do astonishingly well, there are questions to be asked about them.
And there are also, of course, there'll be further questions when it comes to Michael Martin's seat in Glasgow, which Labour is also going to be defending.
Well, of course, I mean, these are all difficult at this point in a parliament, in the middle of an economic crisis, people losing their jobs on the back of an expenses crisis. Of course, people are either going to stay at home or they're going to give you a good kicking. That doesn't mean to say, let me quickly add, that when the big choice comes around next year, when you're choosing who you want to run your government for the next 5 years through some very difficult times, that you're going to make the same kind of choices.
Mr. Wright, thank you very much.